this is Connie Whittick. This is our first episode of the Art of Living Young podcast. And I'd like to welcome a dear friend and a special guest, Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, who is the president and CEO of Trans Leadership. She is partners with Christian executives and secular corporations to develop positive and profitable cultures, select and retain the best people, and create high-performance, strategic, and enterprise-focused executive teams. Her clients live and leave a living leadership legacy to take the organization, the people, and themselves to the new levels of transformation, transcendence, and ascendance for their next chapter. As an executive advisor and consultant for the more than 30 years, she brings wisdom, insights, perspective, and ideas that accelerate, elevate, and transform people and their businesses.
Connie, I'm very delighted to be here with you.
I'm so excited that this is our first celebrating our first podcast. I remember 4 years ago when we met. I think it was 4 years ago. You were well into podcasting, and you're very close to the 500 episodes?
Very close to 500 now.
That's awesome. Well, why don't you give our viewers and our listeners a little bit of your background? It's very interesting. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and I've lived many places in between because of military service, school, and so on. And I've been in Colorado Springs, Colorado now for more than 30 years.
So how did you get started in the corporate consulting and executive advisement business?
It was kind of an odd trip to get to where I am now, because I always was interested in being a psychologist and working in private practice and having people come to my office individually. And then when I was in the Army as an Army officer and psychologist, we not only worked with individual soldiers, we also worked with commanders, the leaders, talked about the culture that they were creating and setting. And we were very busy removing barriers and also adding the leadership that needed to be added for mission success. So in the Army, I thought, well, there's a business application for psychology. I might be interested in that one day. And it was years later, when we moved to Colorado Springs, that I had the opportunity to test that out by working with the Center for Creative Leadership, which at that time was a premier training organization doing leadership development in corporations across the globe. And I decided, yes, I do like the corporate work, and I'd prefer to do consulting rather than training. And so I started my company almost 30 years ago in order to do that.
That's awesome. Well, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you really well over the past 3 years. We met when we were both working on our marketing tools in La Jolla, and I'll never forget when my plane. I always arrive late. And I'll never forget, I was coming in, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wake you up. So I'm just going to go across the way and get a hotel room. And then the next morning, when we all got together to start on our visionary session, the thing I loved about you is that you are super brilliant and you have ideas that most people would never, ever think of. And it was a real eye-opener for me because I focus on CEOs and working with corporations and really a lot of entrepreneurs to develop the interiors, the interior branding, and space. And I do a little bit of what you do, but from a very opposite end. So when we were working on our marketing pieces, I was just fascinated by your insights by working with other business owners. So you really don't need to work, but you love what you do. And you've been in this arena for 30 years. And, we talk every, couple months now?
Mm-hmm.
And it never it always amazes me that you are always building and taking either you or someone else to the next level. So, so what keeps you going and vibrant and really creative working with all of these executives?
Yes, I've been working in this space for more than 30 years, actually. And I've been in the workforce, the official adult workforce, for 50 years. So it's been a long time. And what I believe is important is having a real sense of purpose, a real sense of mission and passion about that. And so I'm really very passionate about coming alongside values based executives, and particularly Christian executives who are not in the Christian workplace. They're in a secular corporation and they want to lead with their values in such a way that it benefits the company and everyone in the company, including those who may not share their faith perspective at all. It's just the values that they're bringing. Well, in order to, I'd say, come alongside people like that, that gets me up in the morning. I'm excited about it. When I watch and see people grow and I see them expand their perspectives and move in new ways and become innovative, that's energizing to me. So I love it. That keeps me young, working with a variety of people who have that mindset.
That's awesome. And then what keeps you young personally?
On a personal side, and this is also a little bit true on the business side too, so I'll mention it in both ways. I'm always about developing the next generations. So on the business side, let me add a piece. I develop younger consultants, particularly those who are psychologists and those who are faith based and wanting to bring their faith to the work that they do. When I was coming along, there was no one who supported that. In fact, they discouraged it. So I mentor younger people who are coming along. And on the personal side, I've got some great godchildren who are young. And we call them our spiritual godchildren. We're really too old to be godparents in the sense of being able to watch over them if their parents die or whatever, because their parents are a lot younger than us. However, we're in their lives to help lead them in the spiritual direction about values, how they're going to live, and all the resources we bring to them, and also their parents for that purpose. And they range in age from like 9 until in the 20s of the younger generation of our godchildren. And then our oldest godchild, who is in a different category, she's around 40 now. And so we have her as well. So I find that that's useful. And I also have nieces, I have great nieces and nephews, and we have a great great nephew. And we're always building into their lives as well. So we're engaged. My husband and I both are engaged in developing the next generations, hearing what they have to say, learning from them as well. And that keeps me young and vibrant too.
That's awesome. Um, there was one thing that in your introduction that I was reading, and it gets into I'm interested in the multi generational, and and you were talking about culture and how values help build culture. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I think that culture, particularly in an organization, is visible because of what people do and how they treat one another.
Mhm.
What they do every day and how they treat one another is grounded in the values that they have and that they've set for their organization. And so, if you are looking at a corporation where everyone gets chewed out every day, that's part of the value system that they have, as opposed to thinking our people are people who have gifts, they have talents, they're bringing them to the workplace, and our job is to develop those gifts and talents, free them up from various barriers, open up opportunities for learning every day so that they can give back to the corporation in a greater way. And not everyone has that mindset. They see their people as interchangeable cogs in the wheel, tools to be used, as opposed to precious human beings bringing wisdom and bringing ability and helping you to be prosperous as a company.
That's a huge undertaking, I would think, in a lot of organizations, but a huge value. So um, that's a wow.
It is a wow. And what's interesting is sometimes people at the top think that they have a positive culture, and what they don't realize is that they don't. And a lot of what they see in their people that they're upset over is because of how the people are being treated or the culture that's been set, and people are responding to that. very often, if you create a culture that's positive, you're going to attract positive people and they're going to be aligned with where you're going. So if something's not right, take a look and see what needs to be shifted in how the company operates.
We're a boutique firm and very diverse. We have people from all over the world. And and when I look for new teammate members, I look for really positive energy that's going to elevate everybody. And and I think that team members are really, really valuable assets to grow and expand on a company. So I think it would be hard, especially for a larger organization, working with you. I think that would be very challenging to help change or shift an organization to build that positive energy.
Let's put it this way, if they are motivated to do so, it's not as hard as it seems. Now, if they're bigger and they've been operating in a certain way for a long time, then it can be a little bit like turning the Titanic around.
Right.
However, we want to get them turned around before they sink and before they hit the iceberg. And so I find that if you start adding what you want to add and creating what you want to create, it does a few things. First, you're signaling to those who fit that mold
Mhm.
that this is the way you are, and they start behaving more in those ways. And you sometimes have to start getting rid of people who don't fit the new direction and
Right.
values and who don't want to fit. And so there is a piece that is about the selection of the right people and then the retention of the right people. You have to reward what you want and you have to sort of like get rid of what you don't want. And so I'm thinking of a company that I worked with one time where they had a senior scientist working for them at the very top levels, very, how would I say, he was a person who was a raid maker, brought a lot of business into the corporation, and yet the way he dealt with people was problematic, and they didn't want to get rid of him. However, the company was signaling that they were moving in a different direction. If they didn't get rid of him, it would say, "We're not really serious." And it took them a while, and finally, they had to get a new president in place who had the power to do it, to actually get rid of that person. And that company took off after that because the right values and culture were being reinforced and people knew they were serious.
Oh, that's awesome. So, who do you work with and how do you add value to them and their businesses?
I worked with primarily corporate executives, C suite or other executives in mid sized to large size global corporations. And that they're not the only people I work with. Historically, I've also worked with senior level military, senior people in the US government, and also in nonprofits with major foundations and some faith based organizations as well. But predominantly, I'm on the corporate side. That's usually where I work. And how I add value, and this may seem odd, but executives have a tough job.
Mhm.
They have many difficult decisions to make every day. And there's a lot they have to consider. So what I do is I bring perspective. I bring in the right conversations and the right questions that help them to get to where they need to be faster and to see what they didn't see before. And that's one of the hugest values. Sometimes you can't always talk to the people in your company when you're at that high a level about the issues that are on your plate. And you need an outside executive advisor who can come alongside you to have what I call the undiscussable conversations and to look at it from many different angles and to enrich their experience. So that's one of the primary ways I add value. I also add value by helping them to think about the culture that they're creating and what would it take to shift it and to change it so that they get better performance out of their organization and people want to work there. This is important because we're in a marketplace where it's very difficult to get the right people that you want. So your ability to attract and retain people is based on the kind of environment and culture that you have. So I also help them think about who to attract and who to retain, how to develop those who are there, and how to grow them so that they continue to be able to add value, and especially the executive leadership team that's working with the executive that I'm working with, because he needs, it's usually a he, but it could be she also. They need those executive team members to also be arms and hands and feet and eyes out there in the organization, making the culture work as well. And so we work with them too.
Well, that's a really big job. Um, so when you go into a new company, let's say an account, do you have a lot of different conversations to figure out the landscape and come up with a plan? How do you do that?
Well, it depends on what I'm there for, because I can be there for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes I'm there for a much bigger enterprise perspective, and I'm working with different people in the enterprise that might require me to interview key stakeholders at different levels and to be able to summarize the findings so that I'm feeding that information back to the CEO and the executive team so they know what actions they need to take in order to move in the direction they're going in. Other times, I'm working strictly with that CEO person, and it's not really expanded to an organization development project just yet. And so, how I work depends on what our objectives are, what we're attempting to do. And I think for many who are in seasons of change and their leadership is so important, the messaging that they put out there, I help with that. The messaging, who needs to hear what. Very often the C-suite individuals forget just how much you need to put the message out, how frequently and in what formats, and who needs to hear what. And so often I have to remind them, just because you said it once doesn't mean that it's really baked into the DNA of the organization or the people. So I'd say what we're trying to accomplish dictates what methodologies we use.
Oh, that's interesting. So, what made you decide to start your podcast?
I started the podcast because I thought it'd be an interesting way to share information and wisdom as I'm in the senior years of my career, and it's time to give back. And so
Mhm.
that was part of it. I also thought it would be useful to have a place and a forum where those who listen to the podcast, they can get some nuggets that are practical for their daily work life. And I wanted to have something substantive to share. And as you know, a couple of years ago, really at the beginning of the pandemic, I took a little turn, and I've always worked with values based leaders. And I decided to focus more on Christian based leaders. So the messages have become much more overtly Christian in that respect. And because my objective is to really inspire that Christian executive that he or she's on the right track. Here's a tool that can help you. Here's a way to think about adding those values in the workplace every day, and for them to meet people who have done it and are retired or who are currently doing it. And here's how they make it work, even though it's not always easy. Not everyone is open to the kind of leadership yet they benefit because the people are honest and they do believe in developing their people and so on. So those are values that every corporation needs to be successful.
That's awesome. Well, tell me, I know when we were working together back when the pandemic hit, we just met, and so we were meeting, I think, once a week at that point, working on our marketing, and you were taking that turn, and I was going from local to national. And actually, we had already worked on some international projects, but we were trying to get more national recognition. And so it was a great undertaking. But I remember when you started your podcast, you were like, oh, if only I could get this person on and this person. And it was all through perseverance that now you attract really amazing guests. And most people give up within the first year, but you've persevered. And tell me about a couple of the large companies now, but the founders, one of which was Uggs. I would love to hear about um, your experience on that podcast.
Yeah, let me share a little bit because the podcast actually existed before I met you, and it's just grown every year. We've taken it to new levels. We've
Mhm.
added, I'd say, resources, ways that we showcase our guests. And it's really all about making our guests look really good so that they can use the assets that we create for them and visual assets, video assets, other written materials, and so on to make it easy for them to share with other people. So they're usually proud of what we create and they repurpose it and they use it. And so that's one of the things. And I also, the way that I interview my guests, I'm asking them often questions and things that other people might not. So it's very unique and it's very different in that sense. And so I'll tell you about a couple of them. And this is a book by Howard Behar, that's called It's Not About the Coffee. And he was the founding international president of Starbucks. And it's interesting how he came into the company that already existed, and he was in a role with if it's like a trifecta of leaders, and he was one of those leaders. And what he says, and this I really resonate with, he talks about how important it is to be about the people. It's not
Mhm.
about the coffee, it's about the people, how you lead them and how you uh, do work with them. And that's what he focused on. And that was part of the secret sauce of success for the business. And so anybody who wants to listen to that is episode 428. That's Howard Behar. Very inspirational. I love the episode with him. And then this book is by Brian Smith, who's the founder of Uggs. And this is called The Birth of a Brand. I absolutely love talking to Brian Smith. His story is one of how to persevere through great difficulty because it was not easy for him to stay engaged in the business when challenge after challenge after challenge, and people would have given up long time ago. He stayed in there, he sacrificed until he saw the business come to a great place. And so his episode is number 438, and I would encourage people to listen to him. And I would also, and his book, by the way, is phenomenal. For any entrepreneur out there, I recommend that book. You'll get to see what they went through and the perseverance that he brought to the table. I also have had Sandra Yancey on the show, and she is the founder and CEO of eWomen Network, which is a membership organization for CEO women. And to see how she has grown her business over about a 24-year period, it's multi-million dollar membership organization, and the way that she has a passion for ensuring that more women have $1 million businesses and enterprises. That's what she's all about. And then the last person I'll mention, there's so many more, but I'll mention Jos Snoop because he is in a Christian ministry. He's the president of the Bible League, and they provide Bibles to people all over the world globally, and they provide resources for people to learn about what the Bible means and classes that teach them where they can teach others in their own communities and villages. So, one of the things that I've been passionate about on the show, and we're always adding an innovation, is for our nonprofit leaders. We actually do commercials that are complimentary, free of charge for them, so that their ministry stays in front of people who would be interested in it and they can learn about all the great work that they're doing. So, Sandra Yancey's episode is number 366, and Yo Snoop is 425 if people want to tune in.
That's awesome. And where do people find these episodes?
And thank you for asking that. A lot of different places. Any place that carries podcasts, you should be able to find us. It's called The Voice of Leadership. We also are on YouTube under my name, Dr. Karen Y. Wilson Starks on YouTube. You will see the channel for the podcast there. We are also on television, Raven International Television Network, so people can go to the internet and then see the show in a TV format. And we're also on iHeartRadio. So we go under two names under regular podcasts and on YouTube we go by the Voice of Leadership. When we're on television and iHeartRadio, it's Dr. Karen Speaks Leadership. Same show, just different names. And we're on iHeart every day. So we bring a new episode every Thursday to iHeart, and the rest are shows from the archives. And that's another reason people like to be on the podcast, because they know that there will be replays on all of our venues and
Mhm.
their message is heard more than once.
Well, I just love your podcast. I also love your personal branding. And I love how you show up to the world and the positive energy. You also work with, you introduced me to Chad Barr, who is hugely super creative and has great ideas. And you did a whole video um, um, kind of show with Chad for a couple days. And I loved the outfits. I loved the whole presentation of that experience. So where do you find those videos and some of the creative pieces that you and Chad produced?
We're in the process of uploading those to our website, and we're developing a new website. So we've held off on some of the newer uploads because we just have to redo it all. But we're building the new website, which will be finished this year. Then we can add all the new video content. Some of it we've put snippets on social media. We have some on the website now. So
Mhm.
if people go to transleadership.com, they'll be able to see some of the videos, and stay tuned because more are coming and they'll be able to see even more.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Thank you.
I saw some snippets and it was very, very interesting. So, well, this is awesome. Well, tell us about where are you going from here? You're continuously building, and what are your goals?
Right now I'm really elevating the media presence through the podcast and maybe through some other venues, because I'm in a lot of places right now through the podcast. And I'm elevating it to the point where I'm hoping we'll be able to attract even more guests and possibly even some show sponsors. That's a new direction that's very important to me in terms of getting the messages out. Also, I'm continuing to build the consulting business. I I love what I do, and it gives me great joy when I watch the faces of my clients and they are delighted to be working with me. I will share this. I have a client who's been with me for over 20 years. And the reason he stayed that long, and I've promised him that I would stay with him until he retires. And he's in his 70s now, and hopefully he'll be retired sometime soon. However, those meetings that we have saved him from a lot of potholes and a lot of difficulties. And when I see the impact and how people's lives are changed for the better, because each CEO that I work with, they affect hundreds and thousands of other lives. And I care about those people as well. So as long as I can continue to do that and really make a difference, I think I'll continue doing it.
So, if somebody saw one of your podcasts and said, "I need to meet her. I want to work with her," how do they contact you?
Very easy. They can contact me through, first of all, email, which would be Dr. Karen, Dr. period, Karen at transleadership.com. And they can also call 719 534 0949 extension 1, and we will get back to them. So we're always looking for high quality podcast guests. Not everyone who's on the podcast is a Christian person from Christian faith, yet they'll have a message that I think resonates with Christian values, and they'll have a business message that I believe that my community needs to hear. So Howard Behar, for example, is a Jewish man, and he does still have a biblical and values-based perspective that, certainly is relevant for my audience. So anybody who thinks that either, especially retired executives, can be useful because they can say whatever they want to say.
That's
And
right.
they don't have to worry about the corporation getting upset about whatever the messaging is now. So people are currently in executive roles who can share some wisdom, as well as those who are retired. We're looking for them. Yes.
So, one other question. Tell me a little bit about your book.
Yes. Okay. And I have a little picture of that, and you probably do too. But this is
I
my
do.
book, Lead Yourself First. And it's the subtitle of it is The Senior Leader's Guide to Engaging Your People for Greater Performance and Impact. Now, what this book really is about is the main title, Lead Yourself First. It starts with you because one of the things that I believe is that leaders are the instrument of their leadership. In other words, your leadership comes from who you are, your panoply of experiences that you've had in life. So in this book, I share some of the lessons that I've learned, lessons from the military, lessons from other parts of my life, working with so many different executives for such a long period of time. And as I share what I've learned, I talk about how I leverage that to benefit clients today. The intention is to get each reader to do that same analysis on their own life. What have I learned? What do I have to bring to the table? How can I benefit others? Because every executive in an organization, they are leading others and they can benefit those others if they take the time to reflect on their own lives, their own lessons, and then have a plan to share that and to use it in their everyday work. So that's what the reader is going to get, a model and some questions to help them think about their own life.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you. And what do you do for fun?
For fun, I love going to the beach. I love going to the ocean. That I live in the mountains
Mhm.
and I live here at about 6,300, feet. And I look out every day at Pikes Peak, which is where America the
Yeah.
Beautiful was written.
Mhm.
However, my place is the ocean. I love both the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. I was recently in Newport Beach where I was on a marina with gorgeous yachts and all of that. That's what I like. I like being at the water, not a lake unless it's Lake Tahoe. I love Lake Tahoe. But in general, for me, it's
The beach.
the ocean. That's what I love.
So that's where you regenerate your energy.
It is. It's where I rejuvenate. I love reading books. And if I'm reading a book on the beach, that's great too, Or if I'm overlooking the beach from my balcony or lanai, that's also fine as well. So, yeah, I love reading. I love gourmet dining, gourmet health food dining. And so my husband and I always are looking for new places for gourmet health food as well.
Well, thank you. It was such a great pleasure to have you on our first episode of the Art of Living Young. And anyway, I look forward to continuing our friendship and
Thank you
learning
so
more from.
much. I look forward to it as well. And I really appreciate being on your podcast, The Art of Living Young. And it's fun to me because even though I may not be young, I can still choose to live young. So thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank you. I think everybody's young. It's how you think, and
Mhm.
everybody needs a purpose, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that I really believe that the whole multi-generational, whether you're, in your teens, um, 5 years old, all the way up there, everybody can learn from everybody else. And I'm amazed that people actually retire. I think that it's going on to the next act. Is everybody needs a purpose, whatever that next act is. So,
That's really important, by the way, what you just said. And often that's something I'm helping executives with too, is thinking about their succession plan, how they're leaving the organization, the people in the organization as they go to their next act.
and what are they going to do afterwards? I
That's
mean,
very
that's a
true. Yeah,
huge, huge transitional change.
it really is.
So, anyway, it was great to have you, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Connie.